you please raise your right hand and just mumble swear you.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Dr. Sperry, if you would state your name and spell it for the jury.
Sure. My name is Kris Lee Sperry. My first name is spelled with a K, and my last name is spelled Sperry.
Dr. Sperry, what is your occupation?
I'm a physician and what's called a pathologist, but more specifically what's called a forensic pathologist or a medical examiner.
Tell us, if you would, where you have worked.
Sure. I've worked for the Office of the Medical Investigator of the state of New Mexico, which is their term for the State Medical Examiner's Office. And that was between, when I finished my training, excuse me, between 1985 and the end of 1989. And then I moved to Georgia and began working with the Fulton County Medical Examiner's Office in Atlanta. And I worked there for 7.5 years and was promoted to Deputy Chief Medical Examiner during that time. And then in June of 1997, I was appointed as the first Chief Medical Examiner for the state of Georgia with the Georgia Bureau of Investigation Division of Forensic Sciences, or the State Crime Lab. And I held that position as the chief for about 18 years and 4 months until I retired from state service on November 1st of 2015.
Dr. Sperry, while you were working as the lead medical examiner for the state of Georgia, did you have occasion to work for the defense as well?
Only when I was subpoenaed. One of the conditions of working for the state of Georgia, the state medical examiner's office, was that neither I nor the other pathologists were allowed to provide testimony for the defense in criminal cases. In rare cases, rare situations, I might be subpoenaed by the defense for one reason or another. But beyond that, no, I did not engage in any criminal defense work.
You are now retired, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And tell us a little bit about your professional history, your education.
Sure. I graduated from college at the Kansas State College of Pittsburgh in Pittsburgh, Kansas in 1975. I was born and raised in Kansas and lived all my early years there. Then I started medical school at the University of Kansas School of Medicine 6 weeks after I graduated from college, and that's in the University of Kansas School of Medicine in Kansas City, Kansas. I received my MD degree there in June of 1978. Then between July of 1978 and June of 1979, I was an intern at the Allentown Hospital in Allentown, Pennsylvania. And there I was what was called a general or rotating intern, that is delivering babies and helping with surgery and working in the emergency room and a variety of different things. And that was to get me prepared for the next 2 years, because between July of 1979 and June of 1981, I was a commissioned officer in the United States Public Health Service. I was stationed with the Indian Health Service branch on the reservation of the Red Lake Band of Chippewa Indians in Red Lake, Minnesota, which is way up north, about 50 miles from Canada. And there I was what was called a general medical officer, basically a family practice doctor and emergency room physician. And I delivered babies. I delivered over 200 babies during my 2 years there, and sewed up lots of injuries and saw countless children. Just a general medical practice. But I was doing that as a commitment to pay back the United States government for the financial assistance they gave me to get through medical school. So I was a commissioned officer, and I was honorably discharged at the end of June of 1981. Then in July of 1981, I started a pathology residency at the University of New Mexico School of Medicine in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And I finished that in June of 1985. And then between July and December of 1985, I was a fellow in forensic pathology with the Office of the Medical Investigator for the state of New Mexico. And when I finished that training at the end of 1985, that finished all of my formal training. I am board certified by the American Board of Pathology in anatomic pathology, clinical pathology, and forensic pathology.
Dr. Sperry, have you had occasion to give lectures or speak at conventions, publish articles? Can you tell us about that?
Well, yes, over my career I've been involved in a lot of teaching. I've written, I think, about a total of 50 medical articles that have been published in journals mostly aimed at forensic pathology, or the type of work that I and my colleagues do. I've given lectures for years to all sorts of different groups, law enforcement, prosecuting attorneys, defense attorneys, DFACS workers, anyone who deals with the analysis or investigation of injuries of all sorts of different types. I've had a specific interest in childhood injuries, and many of the lectures and seminars I've given have focused on childhood injuries and things that are suspected possibly to be evidence of abuse or neglect. So I've done that and continue to do a few, not too many since I retired, but I will be actually giving or participating in a seminar and giving lectures at a meeting in Las Vegas in October. So I still do a few.
Dr. Sperry, can you tell us, was there any controversy surrounding your engaging in private consulting in forensic cases prior to you leaving the GBI?
I don't know if there was what you'd call controversy. This was one of the aspects of my employment as the chief medical examiner. Excuse me, I was permitted, allowed to do consultation work, which I did throughout the country. Just that the one restriction, as I mentioned earlier, was that I could not engage in providing expertise or consultation for the defense in criminal cases. So the vast majority of what I did was, as far as private work goes, related to civil type of work, medical malpractice, medical negligence sort of things, most commonly. And on occasion, I actually would be contacted by prosecutors' offices in other states and asked to serve as a consultant and occasionally to testify. So, well, like I said, that was permitted, it was standard, and there really wasn't any controversy internally anyway.
And did you retire honorably from the GBI?
Oh, yes. I chose, I made up the decision, I made the decision to retire in the early part of October of 2015, and I got a nice, very, very deal congratulating me and thanking me for all my years of service and wishing me well in my retirement. So, and I have a pension just like any other retiree from the state, so I have full benefits, and I'm legitimately retired.
Dr. Sperry, have you been asked by myself to review the Millie Place and Layla Daniel case?
Yes.
And at this time, Your Honor, I would ask to qualify Dr. Sperry as an expert witness in forensic pathology.
Any objection? No objection. He's submitted the spinal.
You've examined all, have you examined, what have you examined?
Sure. Well, I've examined several hundred photographs of both children that were taken at various times after, well, specifically regarding Layla, in the emergency room or in the hospital where she was pronounced dead, and then photographs taken during the course of the autopsy. And with Millie, I've examined photographs that were taken during a physical examination that was conducted, I think, a few days later. I've examined photographs of the Rosenbaum's house, inside and outside, that were taken. I've examined, well, of course, the autopsy report, the various state crime lab reports dealing with different studies that were done, different forensic studies that were undertaken. I've examined medical records for both of the children from a variety of different sources, pediatricians, DFACs, the Children's Hospital of Atlanta, some orthopedic records, so a variety of those. I've examined various DFACs records that were generated for both children over a period of time. I know I haven't seen all of the DFACs records, that is relating to the very early, I would say early years of both children's lives, but at least things that were, as far as I can tell, more recent or more temporally or time related to when Layla died. Let's see, what else have I examined? Just like photographs, documents. I've examined some, I've been furnished some police or law enforcement investigative reports and also interviews that they conducted with a wide array of different people that were, possibly might have had a role or had some information. And then I actually myself went to the Rosenbaum's house and sat and talked with Mr. and Mrs. Rosenbaum and looked at the inside of the house myself. And then, at really my direction, I asked her to show me what happened on the day when all this occurred, so that I could really see for myself what the relationship, really what she did and what was going on as best as she could recall, and the relationship inside the dwelling, especially the kitchen area and the living room, I guess I would say, where all of this took place up until the time that the paramedics got there and took the child.
Did you have occasion to look at the video of Jennifer Rosenbaum's statement?
Yes, I did.
And were you able to look at slides that Dr. Darisaw made? Can you tell us about that?
Sure. Well, as part of the autopsy examination, excuse me, Dr. Darisaw, who conducted the autopsy, took tissue samples from many different parts of the child's body, not only internal organs, but also portions of skin from areas that looked to be injured, primarily the appearance of bruises or contusions, and she took little tiny pieces to look at under the microscope after processing. She also took portions of bone from the right tibia or the shin bone, where there had been history of a recent fracture in that location, and from the left ulna, which is the main bone here on the outside, or I should say, it's really the outside of your arm, where a fracture, a fracture was found after the child had passed away, and then X-rays disclosed evidence of a break in that bone, and then the right eighth rib also. In the back, there was a healing fracture, as it turned out, that also had not been ever detected prior to that time.
Dr. Sperry, after reviewing all the documents, after viewing the video and looking at the slides under a microscope, did you come to a conclusion about how Layla Daniels sustained the injuries that she sustained?
Yes.
And what was that conclusion?
Well, in my opinion, Layla Daniels sustained a multiplicity of injuries, both on the outside of her body, various bruises and scrapes in a lot of different places, but internally also there was evidence of injury involving the pancreas and the liver and the diaphragm and really kind of the upper central part of where your abdomen is and the lower chest. And after looking at all of that and looking at everything under the microscope, and then, of course, seeing her statement and then visiting her house and actually having her demonstrate to me, to show me what she did. That was my instruction. Just show me what happened. My conclusion was that all of these injuries were sustained during a very, very panicked, frenzied attempt to try to save Layla's life after she appears to have choked on some chicken that she had stuck in her throat. And that as Ms. Rosenbaum started, noticed that Layla was choking, and then started trying to dislodge this, but without success, the amount, frenzied is probably the best word that I could use, that she was doing anything that she could to try to dislodge this chicken and save the girl's life, and along the way inadvertently caused injuries to Layla's body on the outside and on the inside because of her intense efforts at trying to save the child's life.
Did you bring pictures with you?
Yes.
Thank you.
These are at least the ones that...
I'm going to show you. Let's start out by talking about the outward injuries, the exterior injuries. I'm going to mark this as Defendant's Exhibit 143. And ask you to
Ms. Paul? Question. I take it this is going to take a while.
yes.
Why don't we take a 15-minute break and then we'll come back?